We will call the meeting to order, and I would ask Trustee Intomasi to begin with an opening prayer, please.
Thank you. If you join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O gracious God, we thank you for calling us to serve you through our various ministries in home, school, and parish as one body in Christ. Keep us mindful of that call and faithful to it. Strengthen us by the power of your Holy Spirit so that, with glad and generous hearts, we may work together in harmony for the good of all, for your honor and glory. Amen.
Trustee Intomasi, seconded by Trustee Rowe. All in favor? Favor. Okay, opposed, seeing none, passes. So now moving on to action items. 3.1, could I have a mover to put this on the table, please? Trustee Trites, seconded by Trustee Intomasi. So it's on the table. And I'll ask Superintendent Overholt.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Policy V04, school fundraising activity, is being brought forward to the Policy Committee to review the recommended amendments based on Resolution 6118 that the Board of Trustees approved on February 20th, and also Resolution 9118 that the Board of Trustees approved on March the 20th. The following recommendations are specific to the resolution. No other changes to the policy have been made at this time. The following are the amendments that are being brought forward. A new principle was added to emphasize the support for the sanctity of life. In the definitions section of both the policy and the procedure, we have defined the distinction between registered charity and nonprofit organization. In the requirements sections of the policy, specific wording has been added to address the requirements in Resolution 6118. Specifically, it reads, school and/or board fundraising efforts shall not be directed to any registered charity and/or nonprofit organization, including subsidiaries, affiliates, and associates, where the donation will support advocacy programs, financial and material support for abortion, contraception, sterilization, euthanasia, or embryonic stem cell research. Note that there has been replaced any reference to public support and indirect support with language around subsidiaries, affiliates, and associates. I will speak to what I know the director may want to elaborate a little bit more, but however, my understanding that the rationale for this was to clarify any confusion around the use of public support and indirect, as public support automatically implies direct support. So we want to make sure that the intent of the policy is very clear and eliminate any confusion around the interpretation of the language. Also, in the requirements, we have included a statement to indicate there is a process in the procedure to vet charities for approval based on Regulation 61, based on the resolution of 6118. Another statement that indicates there is also a process in the procedure to reconsider a charity both immediately after it has been denied and then again after 3 years of denial. The procedure is also included in your package. And in addition to the inclusion of definitions that I've already noted in the procedure area, there are 2 changes. A statement about acceptable use of funds raised for registered charities and nonprofit organization. Specifically, this reads, funds raised in support of registered charities and or nonprofit organizations, including subsidiaries, affiliates, and associates, shall not be directed towards providing advocacy programs, financing or material support for abortion, contraception, sterilization, euthanasia, or embryonic stem cell research. The procedure also outlines an approval process where a registered number is required, objects and mission statement from the organization, and a declaration by an officer of the registered charity specific to the resolution, as well as how a charity may be reconsidered for the list. So the policy and procedures are there for trustees, and certainly open to questions.
Trustee Tomasi, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. There's a few things perhaps, and I mean, there's a lot in here. The one thing that I would like to see added, wherever it says embryonic stem cell research, before embryonic, I would like to see abortion-related, because there is embryonic stem cell research that has nothing to do with induced abortion. There's embryonic stem cell research that happens due to miscarriages, the different health situations. So I think it really should say abortion-related embryonic stem cell research.
Okay. And is that an amendment, or are you just a comment?
I'd like to see that added wherever it appears in the policy.
Okay, so we'll do this. I think there's going to be a fulsome discussion on this, but if you're making that amendment, you have to move it, and you've moved it. I understand. Seconded by Trustee Rabenda, and now we'll go to a discussion on that amendment. Trustee Carabella and Trustee Danko.
I was also going to actually point that out. I wanted to specify it and say human embryonic stem cell research. So I think that is what it's always referred to.
Trustee Danko?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's redundant to say that because the fact that the stem cell research is embryonic already makes it abortive.
Trustee Tomasi and then Trustee Michael.
I beg to differ. Women have miscarriages all the time, and you can dedicate any parts thereof for research.
Trustee Michael.
Personally, I had 3 miscarriages, and I was asked what I wanted done, if I wanted anything done. So I think that's totally a different thing.
It's not what we're talking about. It's a misnomer. It's a non sequitur.
Any further discussion on this amendment? Okay. Trustee Quinn, did you hear that conversation?
I heard the conversation, but I didn't hear Trustee Tomasi's full amendment, so can you repeat that one, please?
Trustee Tomasi, would you please?
It's just simply to insert abortion-related prior to embryonic stem cell research, wherever it shows up in the policy.
Okay. Any further discussion on this specific amendment? Trustee Michael.
I still don't understand why this can't be postponed in the whole until the consultation all comes back.
Sorry,
from
that's not just to keep us in. That's
Yes.
it's a fair comment to make, but
I
we're just
said I
gonna
don't know why.
we're gonna deal with the amendment first, and then if you want to talk about the larger
Postponement?
motion, yeah, correct. Can you bring it up right after, please?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. So any further, Trustee Trent?
Thank you. I'd like to comment too, because there's original lines of human embryonic stem cells. They also, there are other lines that are derivative lines. So you had 9 to 12 original ones. They clone them, and they also, the point being that I think it should be human, all human embryonic, because there are a lot of things out there that we don't know about too, because they do clone and they add to the original lines because there were 9. Anyhow, I'm just saying, I think all human would work nicely.
Okay, see no more questions. I'll call the vote on the amendment. So I will, I'll ask to go around the table.
Can you repeat the amendment, please?
Yeah, so the amendment, Trustee Tomasi would like to change, or just to include add the word thank you, Director Dawson, abortion related, okay, to embryonic stem cells. Okay. To where, okay. So Trustee Carabella,
Opposed.
Trustee Tomasi,
In favor.
In favor.
Opposed?
In favor?
Opposed.
In favor? Trustee Quinn? Okay, and I'm opposed, and that fails 5-4. Okay, so now we'll go on to the larger question, and I want to allow Trustee Michael just to make her comment she wanted to mention.
I just don't think that the consultation can be complete held at this table. I think we have to go to the councils or whatever groups that want to speak on it and let it ride out. And I believe that, like, especially the grade 12 should be allowed to do the fundraisers that they set in place already. I think we should just keep it and postpone the whole amendment until consultation is finished.
Sorry, but that's what we're doing right now.
We're postponing the whole thing?
No, the whole point of this is so this is the policy meeting.
I know.
We're dealing, so.
I understand that.
The policy committee can't postpone something of the board, but the policy committee is asking for changes that would go out for public consultation. So half of what you're saying we can't do here tonight, half of what we're saying we can.
Okay, so I'll go for the half then.
Trustee Ian Tomasi, and then Trustee Rabenda and Trustee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I would propose an amendment to the recommendation. And
Oh, sorry, you already asked for an amendment?
Yes, I had my hand up.
Oh, excuse me. So I'll go to Helena first, then we'll come back to you because you've have one already, and then we'll go around the room. Helena, please.
Well, I have some smaller things, but one is that this policy reference the original motion that was adopted, 6118, so that we have a reference section to reference that, and reference there as well, we could do the Education Act and the fundraising guidelines, 2012, as a subsection. What I'd like to say, and I have several amendments to make that will, I feel that to keep this policy in the spirit and intent of the original motion. So I have prepared some amendments to the wording because the wording as such that we received that's in this policy makes it seem that we can direct the funds to parts of the charities that don't deal with contraception, sterilization, euthanasia, human embryonic stem cell research. And the original motion was that we do not provide or facilitate any financial donations to the charities or nonprofits. Not that we can fundraise for them and they can choose where their money goes. So that I did want to amend on page, on page 3 of 3, the first bullet.
Trustee Carabel, do you have these listed? Do you have
I do.
copies? Could you just, so
Yeah.
people can follow along, can you provide them with copies, please?
Oh.
I didn't hear make an amendment for human, but I did note that she had an amendment. Great, thanks. Do you have them? Okay. Yeah, I have one.
I guess there's a few on here. The one I'm talking about now, which I find just gets to the heart of the policy.
Okay, yeah, so did you want to just go through them and
Okay.
please now at this point?
So how would I do that? Say that these following are all the amendments?
Yeah, well, please outline them for the record.
Okay. So on page 1 of 3 in the principles, I would say the Halton Catholic District School Board recognizes and then I'd like to add the truth that human life is sacred from the moment of conception until natural death as a principal tenet of the Catholic faith. On page 3 of 3, I would like it to say, school and/or board fundraising efforts may not be, and then strike out directed to, but may not be provided or facilitated for any registered charity and nonprofit, including subsidiaries, affiliates, and associates, whose activities support advocacy programs, financing, or material support for abortion, contraception, sterilization, euthanasia, or human embryonic stem cell research. And that's for this, and then I would, sorry. That's right. So that's all for the policy. The rest are for administrative procedure. So I'd like to,
Trustee Carabella, are you asking to put some of the administrative procedure in policy? Because we don't make amendments to admin procedure.
well, the admin procedures are even more problematic, that they speak about directing the funds instead of just not working with that charity in the first place.
Okay, well, let's,
So they are problematic, so they do need to be amended.
okay.
Do I bring that into policy?
Well,
Is that
let's
what you're
deal-
suggesting?
Well, I'm not suggesting anything,
Okay.
but if you'd like to deal with the policy items that you just outlined first, as a first step, and then you can decide, or the board can decide if they want to bring that into the policy, you can do that. So, you're moving these amendments. Is there a seconder? Trustee oh. Sorry, Anthony? Okay. Okay, why don't you lead off with discussion, please?
And it was just to say that since this is now going to be what is going out for input from stakeholders, particularly the mayor councils with whom we have agreed to consult and with students, that I would support these amendments and look forward to hearing input from stakeholders on them.
Okay, so if I may, I think what you said, Anthony, was these amendments would go out to the stakeholders, so these would go out to the community for their feedback before coming back to the board.
That's right, thank you.
Any further comments on these amendments? Okay, then I will call the vote on these amendments. We're just the ones that are on the table right now, just the ones that affect the policy. Yeah, yes, the two. Thank you. Okay, so I'll go around the room as well. You'd like to vote on them separately? Okay, okay, we can do that. So on the first one, again, we'll ask for mover and seconder. Trustee Carabella, you move the first, and Trustee Quinn, you're going to second the first portion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so now I'll ask for the vote. Trustee Carabella,
In favor?
Trustee Intomasi,
We're talking about the first one here? The very first one of three principles? Okay, in favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Trustee Danko,
In favor?
Trustee Rowe,
In favor?
Trustee Quinn? Okay, so it's unanimous. And now we'll ask for a mover on the second portion. Trustee Carabella moves it, seconded by Trustee Trites. Any further discussion on this, just so we don't miss anyone? Nope.
Can you just state it again so I have it? Sorry.
Okay, so it's page 3, sorry, it's 1, page 3 of 3, and first bullet, policy. So we've taken out directed to and replaced that with provided or facilitated for. And we have added after registered charity and nonprofit. And Helena took out where the donation will. And then finally, she added human before embryonic stem cell research.
Okay, in favor, thank you.
Okay. So Trustee Carabella,
In favor?
Trustee Intomasi,
In favor.
Trustee Michael,
Opposed.
Trustee Trites,
In favor.
Trustee Rabenda,
Opposed.
Trustee Danko,
In favor?
Trustee Rowe,
Opposed?
Trustee Quinn.
In favor.
So it passes. Okay. Now is there, so there's two things we can do. One, we can go back to your other comments, or is there further discussion on this motion? Trustee,
I had one thing.
okay, so I'll just hold on a second. Trustee Rabenda, we'll start with you.
Thank you. The date, if I may, unless I missed something, you've got the date in the package as being May 8th, and on the sheet that Janine hands out, there is no date at all.
Okay. Yes, Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we had noticed today that when going back to the resolution, that the wording wasn't correct, and that's why we have made a new report, activity report, where the resolution has changed, so it should be the one sheet that Janine did hand out later on today that we should be going by. So, yes, we went by the resolution in regards to that.
Yeah, please, Trustee Rabenda.
So I just need to understand this. So this recommendation here says that we're sending the correspondence to all stakeholders as well as all parents and staff, and that the solicited views be presented in a staff report for discussion at a future board meeting. But we haven't said how long we're going to give our stakeholders and parents and staff the time to do this. We had a very tight date of May 8th before, and now we have no date at all. So if we're going to send it out, we've got to give guidance as to when we want it back. So, do we have anything?
Okay. Would you like to speak to that, Superintendent?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Regularly, when we do send them out, it is usually a 3-week period. However, the concern we have in limiting it to the 3 weeks is to get councils to be able to respond to that. We're already in mid-April. We've probably missed their April meeting, to then give them an opportunity to get feedback from their community and consult with their community, have their meeting probably in May. We're looking more towards the end of May to get that feedback so that we can come back and report to the board in close to the beginning of June.
So can we put that in as a date, give them some guidance?
Does anyone have any comments on the date question? Trustee Danko, and then I'll, Trustee Tomasi after.
No, Mr. Chair, I wanted to go back to the original, to the policy itself before we talk about the resolution.
Okay. Well, just a moment. So, are you making an amendment to the so, Trustee Rabenda, are you making a amendment to the resolution that would include a date? That's
I'm not making an amendment, I'm making an insertion that we should ask parents, staff, stakeholders to return it by June 1st. Would that be reasonable? That gives them a few more weeks.
So first, Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Chair. End of May, beginning of June, the first board meeting in June, I believe, is June 5th, to be able to get the results collated maybe a little bit prior to June 1st. We could look at a date at the end of May so that we would have an opportunity, and we have our research department here, to be able to turn that around and get a staff report, information report ready for the June 5th meeting.
Okay. Trustee Carabella, and then Trustee Danko.
Yes, what I was going to say was that since it's going to all the parents, wouldn't, like all those parents who would be on council, they would be receiving it and being able to put input on it as well.
Okay, Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it specifically states that this is one item that should be going to councils. Correct.
You mean like as an agenda
It should be,
item?
we should be getting feedback from
Okay.
school councils.
Are we also getting parents? Everybody? Then we need more time.
Through the resolution, it does state that all parents should be
Trustee
contacted.
Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's precisely why I didn't tie it to a date in the motion that we passed for consultation, to try and use as much time as possible to, for as many ratepayers to participate in the process. But I would like to go back to the main policy. if I may.
Unless there's a specific amendment on the table for this, we're going to go back to discussion. So, okay, Trustee Rabenda.
That put it in here, that the solicited, let's just see, third line down, sending the correspondence to all stakeholders as well as parents and staff, and requesting that stakeholders, parents and staff, return their feedback to senior staff by June 1st.
Could I have a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Michael, now discussion. Trustee Danko.
Well, Mr. Chair, the fact is, the matter is that ratepayers themselves need time to feedback as well. So, I mean, in the last round of feedback, we didn't have very much exposure to ratepayers who don't have children in the schools or who are outside the system, or they're just regular voters or ratepayers. So, our track record on this needs to improve. We need to circulate things more widely and more public media. We just put a notice out for the education development charges, and we've put a lot of effort to circulate that to the public, to everyone who has an interest in education. So I think June 1st is, I mean, just judging by the lack of exposure on other matters to the broader public, I just don't see how that could be enough time.
So just to clarify, so do you have an alternative date that you're going to be proposing?
Mr. Chair, I thought I'd leave it open-ended because I thought that's what staff would prefer. So I'm advocating for leaving it open-ended. I think staff's going to be reasonable about this.
And just to clarify, we will leave it up to them as to when they bring it back. So they could potentially bring it back on June 5th or June. Future board meeting. Okay. Yes, Director Dawson.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, June 1st is a Friday, and normally we would send out our board package for the next board meeting for that day. If Trustee Danko is saying, you know, leave it open, I think we'd want our schools to have a heads up before the end of the school year in order to know what the practice is going to be for September. So there either has to be a report back to the board with the stakeholder feedback for the June 5th meeting, or the last meeting of the board is June 19th. And then we can disseminate the information to our schools so they can be prepared for the new school year and their practices of what they're going to be doing.
Trustee Tomasi, and then Trustee Rowe, I think should have her hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my concern was the same thing, as I know that the school communities want to know where they are come September. I know a lot of them would just like to see, at least, as Jane has said, to be able to finish off the school year with the, you know, incentives, et cetera, that they had. And so my concern is that I think time-wise, I'm beginning to wonder where we're going to be if it comes to, you know, mid-June, and we just get the feedback. That gives us very little time also to modify anything, if we're going to modify it.
Trustee Rowe, and then Trustee Michael, and then Trustee Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree. We need a time. They need to publish a date. So whether staff picks it or we pick it, there needs to be a deadline, because, you know, inevitably, when staff just decides to cut it off, then there's going to be, you know, 20 people who want to get in after the fact. So, I mean, it needs to be clarified. It needs to be clear so that everyone knows that there's a deadline. It needs to be longer. But I understand that if we're going to bring it to the June the 5th meeting, then, you know, we probably need at least a week before that as the deadline, whatever that might be.
Following on Superintendent Overholt's thoughts, a lot of the councils and parents have emailed us all. I think there's 3 yesterday asking for an extension because their councils would not be meeting before May 8th. So I think it's very important that we do as your amendment says. Thank you.
Chair Marai, the wording of the resolution right now doesn't constrain the director, and she can decide if she needs to what date to put on the feedback. So leave it up to her.
Benda?
I'm not married to June the 1st, as long as it's June the 1st or later. I've no problem with the director putting a date on it, but I need a date on it because when this goes out, people need to know where they stand. And for too long, they've not known where they stood. So I think that we have to get this tied down. I don't care if it comes back September the 1st, but it shouldn't be short, and they should have a date. They should know where they're going.
Further discussion on that?
Okay, I'll support June 1st.
Okay, June 1st. Okay. Okay, so in that case, we'll take the vote. Trustee Carabella. Yeah.
Are we voting on the date, June
On
1st?
the amendment, which will include the date. So why don't we, Trustee Rabenda, would you mind repeating your amendment, please?
It was just an assertion that the policy committee recommends that Halton Catholic District School Board staff submit policy V-04 as amended for stakeholder input in accordance with operating policy 1, governance of policy, sending the correspondence to all stakeholders as well as all parents and staff with the request that feedback be received by June 1st, 2018, and that the solicited views be presented in a staff report for discussion at a future board meeting.
Okay, Trustee Carabella.
So am I voting on the amendment to change this, or
Just-
the actual full motion right
Nope,
now?
only on the amendment.
Amendment. In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor?
Trustee Michael.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
In favor.
Trustee Rabenda. Trustee Danko.
Favor?
Trustee Rowe.
In favor?
And Trustee Quinn. Great. Okay, so it passes. Now back onto the main amended motion and the general policy. Trustee Carabella, then Trustee Intomasi, and then Trustee Danko.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if that first thing I suggested, that we have a line for reference, and that we reference the Resolution 6118, that we reference the Education Act, Regulation 612, and that we reference, what's referenced in this policy was the Fundraising Guidelines Ministry 2012, that they be inserted.
Does anyone have any concerns about that? They're just adding regulations to it, okay? Okay, see no objections to that. Trustee Intomasi and then Trustee Danko.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment for an insertion into the recommendation, and that is to say that, let's see, there's a staff report be presented as staff report for discussion, and then insert, I'm not sure where to insert this, whether it's either at the end or somewhere in there, but I would like to see a newly created ad hoc committee comprised of trustees, stakeholders, and staff for discussion.
So it's an amendment by Trustee Intomasi, seconded by Trustee Rabenda. Sorry, it's an ad hoc, it's an
Yes,
ad hoc.
to have a newly created ad hoc committee comprised of trustees, stakeholders, and staff. And I suppose we could you could leave it in for discussion at a future board meeting. The gist of it is that somewhere in there I'd like to see it, and the wording is escaping me right now because I was working on the recommendation I had in last night's package as opposed to tonight's.
Okay. Discussion on that amendment. Trustee Danko.
I'm not in favor of it because the parameters of the committee are not defined, and we already set a date for which feedback should be brought back. We already set out a plan of consultation that goes through. We decided what to do with that, and bringing a committee, not doable.
Okay. Further discussion, Trustee Michael.
Just want to clarify that once the information comes back, the input comes back, then you want it to go to the committee? Yes. Right.
Further discussion, Trustee Trites.
I'm not in favor either, because I think thus far, we've yet to do the stakeholder and have it out, and we're nailing that down. But we've also had delegations. We've also received numerous letters. I don't think an ad hoc committee is necessary.
I'm going to take this. Okay. Further discussion, Trustee Intomasi.
I could jump in again. I understand we've had delegations, we've had emails, we've had all of that, but there's nothing in this recommendation for me personally that tells me to just say we're going to get a staff report for discussion at a future board meeting gives no indication to our parents and our school community that we're going to make any change or that we're going to listen to their voices when it's all said and done. And this is why I'd like to see an ad hoc committee.
Okay, further comments? Okay, Seeing none, we'll take the vote on the amendment. Can we just have the amendment repeated, please, once before we vote?
I'm working, and my brain isn't going straight in there. That the solicited views be presented in a staff report to then go back to a newly formed ad hoc committee comprised of trustees, stakeholders, and staff for discussion at a future board meeting.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to ask for the vote, starting with trustee Carabella,
Opposed.
trustee Intomasi,
In favor.
trustee Michael,
In favor.
trustee Trites,
Opposed?
trustee Rabenda,
In favor.
sorry, trustee Danko,
Opposed?
trustee Rowe,
In favor?
trustee Quinn,
Opposed.
and I'm opposed, so it fails 5-4. Okay. So now we're going to get back to the main motion.
Trustee Moran, I'd like to speak if I can.
Yeah, and then we're going to take an opportunity to actually look between the two recommendations that changed overnight. So trustee Quinn and trustee Danko was first, and then trustee Quinn after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're back to the main policy, I take it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I would like to propose an amendment which involves adding a section called transparency and public participation.
Okay.
Yeah, so this would be added to, it would be added after the requirements section. So I'm circulating a list of those. And, Mr. Chair, most of these correspond to the motion that I've had on the table twice that we didn't get to in two previous meetings of the board. So I'll just go through. I have taken some things out, so it's not identical to what I've brought to the board before. But for most of it, these are here. So these mainly deal with the implementation of the recommendation. I mean, and the reason I'm bringing these forward is I've been here for 12 years as a trustee, and I still don't know which charities our board does business with. It's not transparent to anyone. We had just the occurrence last week or a few days ago. Well, to step back even further, we had a list. We had an initial list of 100, which was pared down to 30. On the initial list, Canadian Organization for Development and Peace was on the list, I believe. And last week, four bishops in Canada have determined that that they will withhold funds raised through their parishes. They will not distribute the funds to CCOD because they've found that 40 of the agencies that they work with are questionable. The Bishops' Conference has set up a committee, and that committee has brought back the fact that some of these charities that Development and Peace works with are problematic. So what I'm saying is, my point is that there's a lack of transparency involved, and these are designed to make this more transparent to us and to the public. So I'm going to go through each of these. Number one, so the heading is Transparency and Public Participation for Policy V04, School Fundraising Activities. One, the Director of Education will publish a list of approved charities and nonprofits on the HCDSB website as a sign of the school board's commitment to the social good and charitable activities by June 1st, 2018. The Director of Education will publish on the HCDSB website in a clear and organized fashion all documents discovered during research by staff which prove the charities or nonprofits' compliance with Resolution 6118. 3, the Director of Education will publish on the HCDSB website in a clear fashion all documents discovered by staff in relation to Resolution 6118, which may undermine the approval of any approved charities or nonprofits. 4, the staff doing the research must not simply rely on written statements of a charity's or nonprofit's compliance with Resolution 6118 mentioned above, but must make an effort to find, review, and publish on the HCDSB website all materials associated with the charity or nonprofit on their website or any other website which relates to the charities or nonprofit support for or against the organization's commitment to any funding or public support for abortion, euthanasia, sterilization, contraception, or embryonic stem cell research. 5, the Director of Education must have an open, public, and transparent process for the public to submit new research which may contradict or support the position of any approved or non-approved charity or nonprofit. Number 6, the Director of Education will immediately encourage and ensure all approved charities are fully supported by the rest of the administration, and in no way shall students or staff be dissuaded from ongoing or new fundraising activities for charities or nonprofits which have been approved. After June 1st, 2018, all additional charities and nonprofits will be approved within 60 days of application for approval. Any delay in approval must be due to ongoing investigation of documents found during research, but must be resolved within 90 days of application for approval. A non-approved organization cannot be fundraised for using the resources of the HCDSB. Any charity or nonprofit which continues to directly or indirectly support the activities mentioned in Resolution 6118 may never under any circumstances be entered into a financial relationship with the HCDSB. 9, any charity or nonprofit which in the past has directly or indirectly publicly supported the activities mentioned in Resolution 6118 but pledges not to do so again must not have done so for at least 5 years before it is approved. Further, it must prove that it has not done so for at least 5 years before it is approved. Number 10, the Director of Education will publish on the HCDSB website a list of all charities which the Board has fundraised for in the last 3 years, 2015, 16, and 17, by June 1st, 2018. B, the amounts raised for each charity by year over the last 3 years by June 1st, 2018. C, every year starting in 2018, a list of all charities and nonprofits and the total amount raised for each organization on or by June 29th. So that's what I'm moving as an additional section. You've seen all of these before, twice on March 20th and again on April 7th or whenever our last meeting was.
And we have a mover, and I believe we have a seconder. Just wanted to confirm. If we don't, can we have a seconder, please, for the amendment? Trustee Trites. And now discussion. Trustee Rabend and then Trustee Rowe.
This is indeed the third time we have seen this. You've taken out the Canada Summer Program and you've removed the April 1st date, but other than that, it's virtually the same thing. And that is an implementation plan for 6118 prior to sending it out for consultation. It's an implementation plan. You've told them exactly what's going to be done. The director will do this, the director will do that. It's still an implementation plan. You've introduced it twice as an implementation plan, and now you're trying to shove it into this policy. And it's how to do it, when to do it. It's the same thing.
Trustee Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this really just crosses into the line of procedure. You're trying to put into the policy exactly how how it's supposed to be implemented, and that's not our purview. That's procedure. That's for staff to decide that once we pass a motion, a policy, then they look at the best way in which to implement it.
Further comments? Trustee Intomasi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Number 8, I don't know how you can say, may never ever. I mean, I feel like I'm reading a fairy tale. How do we get to never ever? We are never going to do, how can we possibly anticipate all the scenarios that could take place? This is taking aim at charities, notwithstanding they may not align with some of our faith beliefs. They do a lot of good work, and they save a lot of lives. And they save the lives of probably, you know, a good percentage of our community. I'm looking at this. We brought it. That's the reason I objected to it. You know, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, you walked out of our last board meeting. Okay, so we could have a whole other conversation about that.
No, excuse me. We're dealing with this agenda here, and we're not going to have
This agenda here-
personal attacks on other people.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
On people here. No,
This
no,
is
no,
not
no.
a personal attack.
No.
You made a comment to me. I'm
Trustee
just telling you.
Mossy, germane to your point, and we're going to move this meeting
Germane to my
along.
point was this has been brought up twice. It's been dismissed twice as illegal. We don't have any stakeholder feedback on it. And we're going to take something this size that I know at least 4 of us in the room haven't even seen, except for when it landed here tonight. I've also received other printed changes tonight that that 5 people seem to know something about and the rest of us don't. To me, that's not democracy. I don't think this should be included, and I don't have the time to even sit and filter and think about half of it, seeing how we have to get through our agenda this evening.
Trustee Michael.
I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there, that I think that the 5-4 side, I think we're going to lose again. So we're just wasting our time and wasting our time. This is ad nauseum, month after month. I think the board has other important stuff that we need to listen to. We need to listen to the staff. We need to move on to. We only have really a month left. And this is like, you said it, Anthony, this is the 3rd time you're trying to do it.
Any further comments? Sure, absolutely, Director Dawson.
Through you, Mr. Chair. To Trustee Danko, number 1 and number 6. My question is, the published list of approved charities and nonprofits, are these the ones currently our schools are involved in? And number 6, does it mean that the current charities can continue until June 1st, until the whole vetting process is completed?
Well, I think that we have a resolution that's been passed, so any charities that are clearly not in line with what we've passed need to cease immediately. But that is not to say that we are not discouraging fundraising, because we are not doing that either. That's pretty clear at this point. So what we need is a list of charities that we currently work with, and then we will need a refresh list every year of what's been approved.
Further comments, Trustee Tomas and the Trustee Trites.
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps the director could clarify for me, because I understand that each council is supposed to get a report from their principal of which charities they're supported. I don't know whether they go on individual sites or whether it goes at councils. Well, my understanding is that, and I've seen it in the past at schools, where they have a list, the principal prepares a list that they have to share with their school council of which charities are being supported.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what happens with at every school is the principal, in consultation with the council, will speak to their fundraising efforts throughout the year, and through that, those types of charities in which they will specifically look at donating to would be part of that discussion. It wouldn't be a set list per se that's designated. However, that discussion would be had with their plan, SGF plan, that they would be working with councils on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to point out we didn't have any advance notice of the ad hoc committee that was being proposed as well. Think of the other ad hocs. That's a big deal.
Further comments, Trustee Rowe.
As we can see in the procedure that we have, that schools and school councils plan a year ahead as to what they're going to be working on and come up with a plan and implement it, which is what we want them to do, so that it's all clear to the school community what's going to happen. And so whatever policy we end up passing to change that, I think it shouldn't be implemented until September the 1st, because that's planning for the next year. They've already planned long ago for this year, and so I would not want to see this anything that we pass being implemented before the new school year, since it's not clear even what it is we're implementing, because we haven't had feedback.
Trustee Danko.
Chair Marai, I mean, there is procedure already in the Education Act, and we haven't been following it. It's Section 21, where it's the duty of the board to respond, a list of all approved charities that schools want to work with. And in 12 years, I've never seen a list. I've never approved one single charity that we've ever worked with. And this is a procedure that's spelled out in the Education Act that's never occurred. And nobody is pointing that out, or nobody seems to care. And we're starting to care, and everybody's upset about it.
Trustee Rowe.
I would draw Trustee Danko's attention to the fact that the Audit Committee ensures that every school council publishes a list of all the fundraising they've done and all the charities they've supported, and it has been done. It's been brought to your attention in the audit reports every year, so you just haven't done your homework.
Right, that's not true. I've never been, with this board's never been asked to approve the charities, and that's exactly what the Act specifies that we do, that we approve the charities that schools work with.
Further? Yes, Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. By Trustee Danko, this entire proposed policy will be going out for stakeholder feedback, and everyone that is part of the process will have the opportunity to comment on these amendments. That's correct?
The director says yes. Okay. Further comments on this amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote on the amendment. I'll start off with Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
Very opposed.
Trustee Michael.
Very, very opposed.
Trustee Trites.
Very in favor.
Trustee Rabenda. Disgusted. Okay, sorry, is that in favor or opposed? Opposed. Okay. Trustee Danko.
In favor?
Trustee Rowe.
Opposed?
Trustee Quinn. And I'm in favor, and it passes. Okay.
Chair Marai, I'd like to reconsider our date that we voted to.
Just before that, if I may, Trustee Danko, I just want to bring something to the, I think it's my duty to bring it to the committee's attention. And that is, it was mentioned, but we didn't go through what the actual changes were. So in your package you had before, the motion said, the recommendation said, and I want to make sure everybody hears this. It says that the policy committee recommends, this is, so you have two of these in front of you. You have one that's loose, and you have one that was in the package that you actually got in advance. So I'll read them out, and that way you can make amendments as you see fit, but I want to do it in a transparent way. And I also have a question just about the process. So when did that change, like who made that change, and when was it made?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was me who made the change after reviewing again the resolution and going through that resolution and realizing that the resolution specifically stated the conditions in regards to going for stakeholder feedback and who it was to go to. So that's why that change was made this afternoon.
Okay, now I'll read out the changes. The original one that you got in your package said that the policy committee recommends policy 5-04 school fundraising activities be forwarded to for stakeholder input and returned to the May 8th, 2018 policy committee meeting for further review. The new one we received today, as you have seen, that the policy committee recommends that HCDSB staff submit policy 5-04 as amended for stakeholder input in accordance with operating policy 1, governance of policy, sending the correspondence to all stakeholders as well as parents and staff, and that the solicited views be presented in a staff report for discussion, As you know, we've also amended that to include a comment about timing. But I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the change in wording, so you can make amendments as you see fit. On that point, I think Trustee Danko, you wanted to speak.
Chairman Rai, the motion that was at our places is the original motion. That's what we passed on. Yeah, the one that we got tonight, that's the one that we did, that's the one that we did pass. And I deliberately left it open, ended at that time, so staff could have some latitude to work with it. That was my intent at that time. I think we've gone through the debate on the date, and I have no further discussion on the date.
Any further discussion on the policy or the recommendation in front of us? Trustee Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make an amendment to the recommendation and to add, with changes to take effect on the 1st of September 2018.
Different sentence? Did you just want to say just so it's not a run-on sentence at the very end, did you just want to put these changes would take effect in September 2018? Is that fine?
That'd be fine, yes.
Okay.
Can I get some clarification? So the changes are going to take effect on September the 1st. When is the stakeholder survey coming back? June
What's
1st?
the
That's still at June 1st then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a mover, and now we need a seconder. Trustee Ian Tomasi. Now discussion. Trustee Rowe.
As I made my point before, is that this is a thing that involves the parent councils, and the regulation says they need to be consulted, and they were consulted by the school and by staff earlier this year to set up their goals for this year, and so we're changing the rules somewhat, or modifying the rules somewhat, so that should be reflected in their deliberations for next year.
Okay, further comments? Trustee Danko.
Well, the motion is in effect already. I'm not sure if you need to put a date there.
Okay, further comments on the amendment? Director Dawson, do you have any comments on that?
No, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I think it's gone. For it to take effect in September. I think that was the intent.
But you don't think that there is anything in effect right now?
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Rowe?
Well, I think what's happening now is total confusion. And so, again, just like we want the parents to know there's a deadline for comments, we need a deadline, an actual date that this is clear to the staff and the parents and the students, particularly the grade 12 students for this year who've organized things for their school, that this is the effective date.
Okay. Director Dawson.
Just clarifying, so that means status quo until all the due diligence is done with stakeholder, and then coming back, then nothing changes for what schools are doing now, and then we get all the feedback from our stakeholders, and then it takes effect in September, whatever the approved charities are. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think that's the way also to ensure that this policy that we seem to have amended out of order will be favorably looked on by the ministry.
Okay. Trustee Danko.
Trustee Marai, it's in effect now. It's in effect now, and it should stay in effect. And I think if the director will take the section transparency and public participation to, work by that, then that will eliminate the confusion.
I want to bring up one point, which is that no matter what decision we make here today, the policy committee cannot instruct the board to stop. So although you could put that out for public consultation and bring it back to the board, starting today, the policy committee can't stop the board from whatever it's already enacted. So that's just a consideration. Any further comments on the amendment? Trustee Trites.
Picking up what you said, Chair Marai, so the board, the policy cannot stop the board from what it's already enacted, and to understand that what the board and the Director of Education is enacting is Resolution 6118. Okay, thank you.
Clarification on that, but when we have this particular section that Mark's just put in, and that goes to the board meeting, it could be changed to the board meeting.
Depending on the resolution at the board meeting, the board could make that decision. Okay. Any further discussion on Trustee Rowe's amendment? No. Yeah, would you mind just repeating it, please, Trustee Rowe?
Certainly. These changes will take effect on 1st of September 2018.
Okay, I'll call the vote. Trustee Carabella,
Opposed.
Trustee Intomasi,
In favor?
Trustee Michael,
In favor.
Trustee Trites,
In favor.
Trustee Rabenda,
In favor?
Trustee Danko,
Opposed?
Trustee Rowe,
In favor?
Trustee Quinn. Okay, so that passes. Yeah. Okay. And what's the vote on it? It's 5-3. Okay. Okay. Moving on to the next item. There's no other. The main motion. Thank you, Trustee.
Trustee Marai.
Yes, Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. Through you, I have a question for Superintendent Overholt regarding the language designating definitions of registered charities and not-for-profits. Does that indicate that schools can only raise funds for one or the other or both? And do schools not raise funds for individuals who have neither a not-for-profit status or a registered charity status?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was not indicating one way or the other as to what they can donate to. It was within the resolution, it spoke to charities and nonprofit organizations, so it behooved me to put the definitions of both of them inside the policy to make sure that schools are aware of what they are, both charities and nonprofit organizations. Are they contributing to others? They probably are. In regards to certain families at times, they would probably raise funds for specific close items that affect their schools. So that's certainly more than nonprofits and charities for sure.
Thank you very much.
Further discussion on the main motion or on the policy itself? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote, and we'll just have to read it out again, I think, to include, sorry, Trustee Danko.
Just, Chair Marai, I'd like to reconsider what we just decided on September 1st.
You'd like to reconsider it?
Yes.
You're not on the, so
Oh, that's right.
you are not on the, that's not, okay.
Actually, Trustee Marai, I'd like to reconsider, please.
You'd like to reconsider it?
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll go through the vote again. Trustee, because you can reconsider things at a board meeting or at a committee meeting. Trustee Carabella. Yeah, so good, that's a good point, thank you. Trustee Danko, you have Trustee Trites, you have a motion to reconsider it? Yes. Okay, so we actually have to go through the process of, do we want to reconsider the question and then the amendment? So is there a seconder to reconsider it? Trustee Carabella, and then we'll call the vote to reconsider the question itself. So any discussion on reconsidering? Okay, seeing none. Trustee Carabella. This is to reconsider the amendment on September 1st.
Right, so I'm opposed.
You're opposed to reconsidering?
No. In favor, I understand, sorry. In favor to the reconsideration.
Okay,
Yeah.
Trustee Intomasi, in favor or opposed?
I'm very confused right now. What
Okay.
exactly am I voting on?
Fair enough. So we're doing it in two parts. So the first question is, Trustee Trice has asked the committee to reconsider the amendment on September 1st. So we're simply voting to see if we'd like to reconsider the question. Correct. So you're,
Against, opposed.
okay. Trustee Michael.
In favor.
Okay. Trustee Danko.
In favor?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Trustee-
Opposed.
Thank you. Trustee Danko.
In favor.
Trustee Rowe.
Opposed.
Trustee Quinn. And what is the,
We have 1 to 4 to 3. Got everybody? Got
I was in favor.
so then I'm going to vote to reconsider it. Okay, so now we're back on to the question of the amendment. So we'll have a mover for the amendment. Trustee Rowe, would you like to?
The reason I put the amendment in there is because that's what the ratepayers have been asking for. Students have planned their year, and staffs have followed in good faith all the requirements for setting their goals for fundraising, and I believe we need to respect those goals that the ratepayers and the parents approved. And so they will have a clear direction for September rather than halfway through the year or partway through the year.
Okay, any further comments before we?
Trustee Quinn?
Yes, Trustee Quinn?
Thank you. Just on the amendment, and I understand Trustee Rowe's point, but I'm looking forward to hearing back from the stakeholder consultation on that point, and perhaps we could put that date in at that time. So, thank you very much.
Okay, further comments as to this, this amendment? Okay, so now we're back to asking, it's Trustee Rowe's amendment, if we will have this implemented for September 1st. I think that's a fair recognition of it. So I'll call the vote if there's no comments. Seeing none. Trustee Carabella.
Opposed.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Michael.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
Opposed.
Trustee Rabenda.
In favor.
Trustee Danko.
Opposed.
Trustee Rowe.
In favor?
Trustee Quinn.
Opposed.
Okay. And I'm opposed. Okay. Okay, so that's not in the, added into the recommendation. Okay, so now we're back at the recommendation itself.
Trustee Rowe, I'd like to call the vote, please.
Fair enough, we had a long discussion on this. Any other further last minute questions? Comments? Nope, seeing none. We'll call the vote. Yeah, that's a fair point. So we made a lot of changes to it. So what I have down here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the policy committee recommends that the HCDSB staff submit policy 5-04 as amended for stakeholder input in accordance with operating policy 1, governance of policy, sending this correspondence to all stakeholders as well as parents and staff, and the solicited views be returned to trustees by June 1st and presented in a staff report on June 5th.
Not returned to trustees,
Okay,
just returned by June 1st.
okay. Is everyone clear on the change we made to what you have in your paper?
So I'm not sure how I'm going to get that.
Director Dawson, please.
The June 1 is problematic now with trustee Danko's insertion in the policy.
What part?
The dates that are required to have things back filed.
So just to clarify what we're doing here, we're putting this policy out for consultation with the community. We're going to get feedback back, and then the board will decide if we want to implement the policy that's stated here. So this policy doesn't take effect just because of the amendments we changed. This is just going out for stakeholder feedback. Okay, so does that cover your concern? Okay. Trustee Carabella.
Just added for clarification, For, it says all stakeholders as well as all parents and staff. And under stakeholders, will that go out to the community at large, the ratepayers? Is that included?
Director Dawson.
Whoever we have on our distribution list as giving us their email address in our student information system as our stakeholders.
Okay. Superintendent?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe when the survey for trustee distribution went out, it went out through various social media means. That I think that would be another means in which that can happen as well.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. So all in favor of the amended recommendation that was put forward? Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Michael.
I'm opposed.
Trustee Trites.
In favor.
Trustee Rabenda.
Opposed.
Trustee Danko.
Favor?
Trustee Rowe.
In favor.
Trustee Quinn? Okay, so that passes. Okay, so now we're moving on to 3.2, Policy 2-38, Educational Research Surveys and Pilot Projects. Ms. Colley-Moore.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Before you, you have the Policy 238 Educational Research Surveys and Pilot Projects. I've highlighted some of the modifications that have been made. The purpose, the application, and the scope sections have all been changed to represent the various types of research activities that go on in the board. References were added, definitions were added, some were removed. And some, in terms of the principles, some were reworded, some were moved to the requirements section. And in light of these changes, I'm also asking for that the name of the policy change to simply 238 Educational Research. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, I'll ask for a mover to put it on the table. Trustee Tomasi, seconded by Trustee Michael. It's on the table. Questions, comments, discussion? It's clearly so excellent that we don't need discussion, so. Any questions? Okay, no? Then I will call the vote. All in favor? Trustee Quinn?
In favor?
Okay. Opposed? It passes. Okay. We're going to be moving on to 3.3, Policy 2-43, Voluntary Confidential Self-Identification of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Students. Superintendent. Could we have a mover to get this on the floor? Trustee Rowe, seconded by Trustee Trites, and then we'll have our presentation. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. We just, the same with what Lisa was talking about as well. We just want to make changes to reflect the current trends. Within the First Nation Métis Inuit Education Policy Framework, we want to redefine, refining the purpose, scope, and sections to reflect such, as well as clear definitions of who First Nations Métis Inuit are, and expanding on our principles of accountability, excellence, equity, respect for diversity, as well as providing, protecting the identity of our self-identified students.
Thank you. Questions or comments or discussion on this policy? Trustee Carabella.
I'm just happy to see you here. So that was my question, to see if you had gone through this policy. And then, do we have many students that self-identify, or has that increased over the years?
Right now, we have listed 141, but based on historical injustices, we know that people will not identify until they see that there is something that's been happening in both our schools, as well as changing of attitudes in our society.
Further questions? Okay, seeing none, Trustee Quinn, do you have any questions? Nope, okay. So then I'll call the vote. All in favor?
In favor?
Okay, opposed, seeing none, it passes. So we're moving on to 3.4, Policy 2-15, International Languages Elementary Program. Superintendent McGillicuddy, yours? Okay, Superintendent Overholt.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, Policy 215, International Language Elementary Program, a policy that provides direction on the implementation and administration of the International Language Elementary Program. It was last amended in April 2015. Minor amendments have been made. We've added appropriate headings in the policy to align with our current template, and specifically added to the application and scope and who it applies to. We reorganized some current wording to match up with the section which it belongs to, specifically the principal section, and as well clarification in the requirements section as to who the written requests must be sent to, and in our procedure, it pretty well matches what our policy was. So we have said we were going to bring over the two items that were in the requirements into the policy and make the procedure redundant and rescind that. So those are the minor changes that we are making to this policy.
Could I have a mover, please, to put it on the table? Trustee Rowe, seconded by Trustee Rabenda. Discussion. Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll take the vote. All in favor?
In favor?
Opposed? Seeing none, it passes. Just want to make sure you get everyone down properly. Okay, 3.5, Policy 2-31, Risk Management First Aid. Superintendent Overholt.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this policy is one in which addresses first aid for employees and students of our school board. Again, very minor amendments have been made, addition of references, as well as stating the specific recognized certification body in which organizations need to use to train staff in order to comply.
Thank you. Mover to put it on the table, Trustee Intomasi, second by Trustee Trites. Discussion. Okay. Okay. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
In favor?
Opposed? Seeing no opposed, it passes. Thank you. 3.6, Policy 2-33, Safe Arrival at School Program. Superintendent Overholt.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this policy is in place to ensure all schools have consistent practices to promote the safety of our students at our school. Again, minor amendments have been made. The purpose has been adjusted to acknowledge that there is a need to maintain and review rather than to develop this policy at this point in time, and specific requirements to school process that need to be followed.
The mover to put it on the table, Trustee Rowe, seconded by Trustee Danko. Discussion.
Have a question?
Yes, Trustee Quinn.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to Superintendent Overholt. Personal observation, my daughter's high school, Holy Trinity, implemented an email safe arrival or notice of absence recently, and I'm wondering about the efficacy of such a procedure when emails can be accessed easily and deleted easily, and how we can ensure that the actual emails are coming from parents and not from someone else.
Superintendent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, within the procedure, it does state that email would be one means of being able to communicate with the school. In regards to verification of the individual, I guess I would have to check with schools to ensure that that is a method in which we can make sure that it is coming from the proper individual. So I'd have to follow up on that.
Thank you. May I follow up?
Yes.
Now, my concern isn't just that the equivalent of having someone sign a note, Epstein's mother, or that old joke, but just that email could be used by other persons to indicate that a student wasn't arriving in school, and neither the parent nor the student may be aware that was happening. So I think we need a little bit further investigation into
Mr. Chair. It would be a verification that the email that's on file would be the email that they would accept as to the student being away absent. So they do have their emails as contacts, so that email would be the one that they would be expecting to come in for reporting of the absences.
You, Mr. Chair, for Trustee Quinn. Whatever the parents give to the school is put into the student information system, and that is the one that is that the school is expecting to receive from the parents who validate those emails at the beginning of each year. So if it doesn't look like it's what's on record, I think they would make a call.
And through you, Mr. Chair, one more note is that we will verify with schools that parents have confirmed that that would be the means in which they would communicate to the schools to report their absences as well.
Further questions or comment on this policy?
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, we'll take the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Trustee Quinn didn't hear anything? Okay. It passes then. Okay, moving on to discussion items. The first one is 4.1, and I will start off this discussion. So, did you have a comment?
No, I can just lead into it.
Oh, please, no, sorry. This is actually, I got them mixed up. This is 4.1. Please do begin the discussion. Director Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was asked previous policy committee meeting if I would look at this based on my experience having utilized the process and forms over the past number of years, and just a refinement.
Sorry, Trustee Roy, I can't hear Trustee Dawson.
Okay, sorry, Trustee Quinn. You'll recall I was asked to just come back and maybe make some amendments of what I had found in my experience with the performance appraisal and some of the feedback that I could provide to trustees with regard to the process and the forms. So what you will see in here is the Appendix A was mostly changed because I felt there was some duplicate areas. One area was eliminated and incorporated into another area. I know that we wanted to look at this Catholic System Leadership Framework as well as the multi-year strategic plan, so I tried to include that. Also, there were some scoring elements. Originally, it was a 1 to 4 scale, with 4 being unknown, and I didn't think that was appropriate to give it a score. So I just put an X or, something that wouldn't be allowed to be added up and scored. So that's how I changed Appendix A. So if you want to move to Appendix A, you look at all the scoring areas. I've tightened up some of the language. I've included more of what the director is focusing on: faith and education excellence and student well-being under cultural leadership. Communications, I added a little bit more about communicating policy and procedures and legislation. And then staff relationships, I've added a few more things. The community and public relations, there was no mention of local or provincial, so I added that. And vision of the future, so articulating the mission and values as well as reflecting the board's strategic priorities was added. And organizational leadership was the one that I incorporated with general system leadership. So I added a few more items there: dealing with difficult issues, providing clear roles, integrating feedback from trustees, staff, and the community, and fiscal leadership, ensuring that the budget planning process reflects accountability and planning for and economic political realities. And the last one, I just added some things with regard to being involved in provincial initiatives and projects and recognized as a professional leader. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Dawson. Questions or comments? Trustee Danko.
Chair Murray, I think I would like I appreciate that strategic priorities has been added or enhanced in number 6, but I think it could be fleshed out even more. I think that, given that we want to set clearer targets, and I'm thinking back to the Ontario Auditor's Report. So that's where I'm getting this thread from. I mean, in that report, the auditor said that some boards were clearer about tying performance to strategic objectives or having clear strategic objectives. So clarity in those is key. So I think that a key part of director's performance appraisal is measuring against strategic priorities and defining those clearly. So I think that section 6 ought to be worked out more.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think you could add that kind of language in the policy. This is more like your scoring. This is your feedback form, right? So you wouldn't put it on there. We could add it in the actual policy language.
Yeah, I agree. That's better.
Trustee Danko, do you want to take maybe that away? If this is coming back to the policy committee for action, did you want to maybe take that as a takeaway to maybe develop that if that's something of interest to you?
I'll take a cut at it.
Okay. Great. Director Dawson.
But I can add some language too. We could work on that, but I just wanted some feedback on the appendix because that took the most editing tonight. And then if we're just going to work on the language for this strat plan.
Further comments on the policy or the appendix? Okay, well, you can always send comments in, and we'll bring this then back to the board for action, or the policy committee, excuse me, for action, and we can always make amendments at that time as well. Thank you very much, Director Dawson. Discussion item 4.2, executive compensation policy. So I wanted to take this opportunity to take you through the changes that were made between the last meeting, the February 28th meeting, and this meeting, and then open it up for discussion and input on other changes we may want to make. And I did listen to our meeting a few times just to try to get everyone's comments in, because they didn't all necessarily correspond with each other, but I tried to make sure I included as many as I could and where appropriate. So here are a few notes that I just takeaways from the last meeting. A lot of people mentioned compensation and merit-based pay being tied to strategic objectives. There was a large discussion about trustees not wanting to sit in on interviews of superintendents, though the policy originally didn't really talk about that, so we just kept it out as well. Trustees want the director to provide a recommended contract for new superintendent hires. That was another takeaway. Trustees want the director to provide the performance appraisals of the superintendents and potential merit-based pay as a recommendation to trustees, but developed, the key that I heard at the last meeting in the videos was that it be developed by the Director of Education. And we needed further clarification on grid movement or merit-based pay and how it occurs, as well as there was a comment towards the end that Trustee Rowe commented on how experience should affect base pay. So so then if we get into the actual meat of the policy, I really attempted to make it as practical as possible, because obviously this will not have a procedure, an administrative procedure that staff develop for obvious reasons. So what I did was I really got down to how the board will implement this on an annual basis. So the changes are in red. I put in some wording if we just go through page 2 of 4, approvals of compensation. We can see that I just mentioned the base pay being approved in an in-camera meeting of the board. And I know based on the most recent changes, the director is looking for some direction from us on the 3-year grid. So that is something that will have to come before the board in the next little while. So that just references whenever there are changes provincially and whenever we have to make decisions on potential grids that just come before the board. Again, it specifies the Director of Education proposing the merit-based payouts, and also that the merit-based payouts of the Director would be directly approved by the trustees. So then you go into, if we go to page 3, I really create the framework to how we get this done on an annual basis. So first off, this is all done and approved at the same time as the budget for the year before the next school year, where the base of pay, and I specify for the most current year in the next 3 years, because that's obviously what's imminent, but this policy tries to be forward-looking and also consider any changes that may take effect in the future. So it states 2017-2018 as the base level, and any new executives hired by the HCDSB would be given a base pay informed by the Tier 4 salary range outlined in the November report that we received from Mercer. And I also put in a line that, and this is, I guess, a statement, that the board believes that new executives should be base pay should be informed by the number of years of experience they also bring to the board. So that's kind of an overarching belief. And then the real meat of it is in, because we move from really a grid-based pay system to one very much of merit-based pay. So, and this looks to the next 2 years where there's money available to pay merit-based pay, but then it also sets out what the board could do in future when there are increases from the government. So the total amount of merit-based paid out to executives of the HCDSB will be determined by the increase in the envelope over the base year of 2018. So what it's saying is we have our 2017-2018 base year. That's the money we got this year, which we can't change. And then from there on, the increase next year, the 2.6%, which amounts to about $51,000, would then be distributed by trustees, by superintendent at the final board meeting in June, or at a June meeting. And so it specifies that it would be at the last meeting of the school year. And this coincides with the objectives that we're giving. One of the pieces of feedback was we want to align merit-based pay with are they meeting the objectives of the strategic plan of the board. So similarly, the director, keeping in mind that the director is responsible for the superintendents, will draft objectives for each superintendent on an annual basis in line with the goals of the objectives of the strategic plan. The director will submit these objectives to the board at the last meeting of each school year for approval of the board. So we would set out what the merit-based pay increases would be, what the objectives would be, and then 1 year from them, we can see if they've met those objectives and if the payout of the merit-based pay would occur. So it's similarly, the board would draft the objectives of the director, and that would be approved by the board. And then it goes into review. So again, the director shall review the performance of superintendents and submit a written formal report to trustees that outlines superintendent's performance, obviously in camera, against their objectives, as well as advice on the payout of the merit pay. And then this would come to trustees as an action item to be completed. And similarly, the board would review the director, which we do on an annual basis already, and then we would decide on the merit-based payout of them. And then the transparency is the same. I didn't hear any comments about that in the last meeting. So those were the changes. It includes, I think, everything that was mentioned. Certainly there's going to be a discussion on this, so I'll open up the floor. Trustee Rowe.
Just to clarify, so the merit-based pay amount is determined after movement on the grid for the next year?
So just to clarify, we have the opportunity to implement an automatic grid for superintendents, or we have the opportunity to apply a merit-based system, or we have an opportunity to apply any system. true in the education sector. They're used to a grid where they automatically get raises on an annual basis. In this case, it would be merit-based, where they would get increases based on the distribution that we determine to be paid out at the end of the year. So we have an increase in the envelope, an automatic increase in the envelope of 2.6%, and then trustees would say, this is how it's distributed amongst superintendents, and this is the objective they need to meet in order for it to be paid out. So it's a fair point. What is the grid look like for this? Over the next 3 years, there's no grid. There is the opportunity for merit-based pay to be paid out, but no grid. Trustee Rowe and then Director Dawson.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that. I think, my point was last time, that they need to move on the grid for experience, and then we look at the merit-based pay. But unfortunately, we don't have any room for merit-based pay because we restricted ourselves.
Your suggestion would be to use the entire 2.6% to up them each year automatically with a 2.6% increase.
No, we're getting a 2.6% increase on the envelope. So then we set up the grid, and then if there's money left over, then that's fine. But they need to receive a movement on the grid for experience, and then whatever's money left, like however we set up the grid. But it's not 2.6 per person, it's 2.6 on the package.
It's 2.6 on the package, which equals $51,000 in this year, and you can distribute that any way you want. But you can increase the same process if that's how you'd like to do it. If you'd like to get rid of merit-based pay and fully implement a grid system where everything would be automatic over the next 2 years, you could have the same process where the distribution by superintendent is on an annual basis. So you could have a grid movement. You could decide it today, or you could decide it every year on what the distribution would look like for superintendents, depending on how many years all of them have been here and the distance and experience between some of the newer ones to the other ones. So you could still make that determination on an annual basis if you like.
No, but I think the grid needs to be guaranteed. So there needs to be a grid, and it can be a small increase, but it's an increase based on experience that they're going to receive automatically. They know they're receiving that, plus the ability for merit-based pay. Although for the next 2 years it might be rather small, but as you say, the envelope increases, then it gives us more flexibility with the amount there. But we have to recognize the experience that they've gained by doing a year's work. So I'm not saying one or the other. I'm saying both.
Okay. Trustee Danko, I think you had a comment?
Or are you linking any increase at all, purely to the review, or it's 100%? It's 100% merit based. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Based on the report and review and discussion and approval.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just under the approval of contracts, it says, though the director is solely responsible for the hiring of all superintendents, contracts will be approved by the trustees before being signed. I'm thinking of the Education Act, Section 286, number 3 and 4. Who's responsible for the superintendents? So I would think if you're going to do 100% merit-based and the director is hiring, you would hope that I would come to you to say, this is a contract, I want to hire, like we do currently, this particular person for the superintendent. The trustees would have already seen what a contract looks like for a superintendent. You're saying we support the director's choice. Because the contract you would have already seen, because the contract will be standard for all superintendents. So you don't need to approve it, you just need to support the choice of the director for appointing the superintendent.
And if you're suggesting that the contracts never change from superintendent to superintendent, it's the usually I'm worried about, right? So if we have like a template that we kind of agree to, where we know it's in line with the policy, that seems more than reasonable. But I think we just need to get a determination at the beginning, so that, and even maybe in the policies, any changes to that template contract will just be shown to trustees before the change is made. But that's reasonable. That's Superintendent O'Hara.
Thank you. Just a couple questions of clarification. When you're talking about a lump sum paid based on performance, is the intention for that to be a permanent increase to their base pay?
No.
Okay, so if you don't do that and you just pay based on a lump sum, then it's not pensionable earnings, and then so what you'll be doing is essentially setting up your senior staff to be the only individuals who aren't receiving any kind of increase that impacts their pension. And so you need to be aware of that based on rules under TPP and OMERS, if you're going to something which is essentially a straight merit-based pay that you give and you take away, that means there's zero financial gain for that person in terms of their pension. So that's yet another penalty that you're putting into the compensation plan for a small group of your employees. I had indicated to you it's very important that you take a look at whatever you're doing and put that through legal counsel, because if you don't do that, you're putting the board in jeopardy of more legal action.
One of the takeaways, thank you for that. One of the takeaways from this is both consultation with the community, because it's a policy, but number two, obviously, one of the takeaways from our policy committee in the past was that we wanted this to be vetted to make sure that it's in line with what we're allowed to do, but which I think it is. Number two, that it doesn't break any contractual arrangements we have or cause us any more trouble with lawsuits in the future. So those are two things that I think everyone would agree that needs to be done. Any other comments on the changes made? Superintendent.
I also wanted to point out the definition of compensation. You've got included benefits and or non-cash compensation. It's important for trustees to know that all non-union staff are moving to an employee life and health trust effective June the 1st of this year. And so benefits, with the exception of long-term disability, will all be consistently applied across the province based on the rules that the trust sets. So in some respects, you need to reflect that in this policy, because that's all that ship has already sailed. Benefits are consistently applied across the province, with the exception of a few things based on decisions that the Employee Life and Health Trusts make.
So two ways to deal with that. We could just clearly this has become a monetary policy on that aspect of base pay and merit pay. So we could just simply take that portion out and just either keep it silent or reflect what you just suggested as well. Thank you for that. Trustee Intomasi.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to say that I agree with Trustee Rowe. I think we need to have a grid. I think we need to have something established. We have superintendents in the room is one thing. There's going to be changes, I'm sure, in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And when you've got new employees coming in and they're looking at a contract and they don't see any grid and they don't see any real incentive except the will and the whim of the board, you're going to be, I think, harder pressed to entice people.
Trustee Rowe.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Mr. O'Hara's comments about and the pensionable implications. That's very important. So even if it's just a standard amount, but we should have a grid. It should be applied so that there's going to be some kind of increase across the grid each year for experience, and then we can apply the other as well.
Do any other trustees have opinions on the merit-based versus the, it being fully merit-based versus automatic grid movements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure that this is really pertinent, but I'd like to hear from the director. She's in her last couple months here. And, I mean, she talks to other directors. What are her thoughts on trustees setting increases as opposed to directors setting increases? Because I'm thinking, you know, superintendents work for the director. They don't necessarily work just for the trustees. So
To clarify that, sorry.
if trustees are going to be approving incentives, whatever, I'd like to know her opinion on it as opposed to a director deciding what it should be.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I agree that there should be some monetary movement on a grid that superintendents are aware of when they sign up for this job, that they should know they can plan, they get a certain step up for each year of experience, and if there's money left over to do merit-based pay in that envelope, and they have a successful performance appraisal, I could make recommendations to the board to say, you know, okay, this person deserves whatever's left in the envelope, the merit base or the performance pay. That would be in the spirit of the Executive Compensation Act. Normally, this is a new phenomenon, merit-based pay in education. However, it is permissible in the Compensation Act. So that would be my suggestion.
So any other thoughts from trustees on merit-based versus just automatic grids? Yes, Trustee Rubin, excuse me.
Thank you. The merit-based pay, considering how little we have, is beginning to sound more like a bonus. You say that it can come and it can go. So, okay, so I've done a phenomenal job on something this one year, so I would get the bonus for this year. And then next year, maybe somebody else would get it for their phenomenal job. Because we should have something on the grid. The teachers are on the grid. And so should our senior staff be. So I don't see that there's a great deal. I appreciate the work that you've put into it, and I think it's a good initiative, but we don't have a lot to play with. And when you're saying we'll take it and give it 1 year, but not the next year, it's beginning to sound like a bonus. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a little different.
Other comments on base pay versus merit? Yes.
Trustee Mariah, I'd like to speak, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Just to clarify through you the comments from the director and Trustee Rowe, my reading of your draft was that there would be a set plan in place for the director to implement and a strategy for merit-based pay. And I think merit-based pay is really, in contrast to a grid plus merit bonuses. Merit-based pay is strictly having your increases based on your merit and not guaranteed in every year. The question, I think, for clarification to you is that the director would not be coming back to us asking for approval on the merit-based increases to the superintendents, but rather he or she would be following the formula set out by this policy and implementing it according to policy, and that may include a maximum for a superintendent 1 year and nothing for a superintendent in the same year.
That's correct. So I sent out separately. I sent out what a potential merit-based pay system could look like based on the approval of trustees at the end of the year, just so you have an example of what you could do. the trustees did, because it included names of superintendents, so it wouldn't be appropriate. Okay, so thank you for that. And are there any other opinions on merit-based pay versus just automatic increases on the grid? Trustee Rowe and then Trustee Danko.
Thank you. The reason why we're in this situation, the government found ourselves in this situation, is because of the pay freeze. So it did not freeze for teachers and it did not freeze for principals. So the principals, they had their increases and they slowly catch up with the superintendents whose pay are frozen. And if we don't have at least some grid movement on there, we're going to end up in the same situation again. And people are going to say, why should I take on the extra responsibility to be a superintendent if I'm not going to end up making much more money than if I just stay as a principal? And it comes down to people who become superintendents are drawing to the end of their career, and what the pension that they take home is very important. So if the pension that they take home is going to be very similar to what they're going to take home if they stayed as a senior principal on the grid, why bother take on the added responsibility? So we would be cutting people out of the loop, potentially some very good people that could guide our system. So that's why I want to see a grid with a base increase, and then implement a formula for the merit base.
Okay, so both included in the policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Trustee Danko.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm in favor of a merit-based pay. Whether it's 100%, not so sure. I think we have to work through some of these questions. But I can tell you that a lot of organizations keep executives flat from year to year. That this does happen. It's not unheard of, and I think that, you know, in government organizations we have a culture where we just expect automatic increases, and I don't agree with that either. I don't think that's a good culture to have. But you know, I'm not saying I'm committed to 100% merit pay either. So I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. I lean towards a merit-based system.
Okay. Further comments on automatic grids? Trustee Carabella.
I'll just say that I also am in favor of it. I don't know how much, but I am in favor of that.
Any other comments? So here's anticipating that people would have different views on this at this meeting. One thought, what I could do to take it back is under the practical review that would occur on an annual basis, we could add language where the board would decide on what so you have the 2.6% increase. The board then would decide of that 2.6, how much would correspond to base pay increases, how much would correspond to merit-based pay increases. So we could build that language directly into the policy, frankly, with one sentence. And then on that annual basis, the board then can decide how to implement it year to year, keeping in mind that until the government, potentially looks at the formula of executive compensation generally, this can completely change in 2 years' time. So does that that's exactly what you kind of said, Trustee Rowe?
No, I don't agree with that, because again, as the point was made, it comes down to the whim of the superintendent, of the trustees at the time. So they need to know they're signing a contract, a commitment. So if they're committing themselves, we need to commit ourselves. So we can decide ahead of time. So we're going to get a minimum of $51,000. So what percentage of that are we going to apply to the grid? So decide that now. It's in writing, and that's what they're signing for. So they're going to get that, and that's going to be part of their pensionable earnings, and then the other percentage will be divided according to another formula.
Okay, so I think I hear the distinction. So there's two things. and firstly, like, it is decided by the trustees in either case, but to your point, this board would decide the increases over the next, for the final 2 years of the grid. We'd say how much of the 2.6 will be applied to their base pay, right? So that would be decided. We'd have a meeting on that. It'd be separate. And then whatever's left over this policy would come into play for the merit-based pay system. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay. And then how the language of the policy could change is, we could build in the language that every time the grid ends, the trustees of the day would approve a further grid increase and decide the distribution of base grid increases, and merit increases. Does that, just trying to get the feeling of the group. Trustee Danko.
So you're saying have an allocation clause in there, some allocating so much between two, yeah.
Can't help myself. I'm just saying, we may not want to get too crazy until we see what the next government's going to do. We really don't know, if there's a change in government, whether this 3-year thing is going to hold or whether there's going to be a change somewhere. Who knows?
So I thought about that too for a second, and I thought to myself, hey, wouldn't it be great if we put ourselves in a strong fiscal position where we're not guaranteeing these things moving? That's I do support 100% merit-based pay on that, and I do support a lot of the comments that Trustee Danko made on the difference between the private sector and the public sector. So I think you're right, and I'm not. I know you're not saying that. I'm still for grid. I know that, and I recognize that. But I think it's a fair point that we may not want to tie ourselves to a grid over the next 2 years, because I don't think anyone thinks in this room that they're going to keep increasing money in education. I don't. Director Dawson.
Just one last thing. I believe if you don't give people the security of knowing what they're going to be making when they sign a contract over the next few years, you won't get anybody who would be willing to take a risk on this board to work for them.
And to be fair, that's a fair comment, but I did specify in here any new hires would be based on the tier 4. So it's not like band 4, thank you. It's not like we're going out and saying they're going to make $90,000 a year. So, but point taken. So is that at least direction for me that you want to open this up to allow an option for the board to choose grid? I get the distinction that you mentioned, Trustee Rowe. If that's the direction you guys would like, I'm happy to take another cut. What I'd probably do just to move this along would be to include that language. You can amend it, of course, but bring it as an action item at the next policy meeting, and then we can put it out for public consultation as well as send it to the lawyers. So if we have any additional changes, that can be done at that point, and then at least start getting on the board agenda so it can be passed in this term. Okay, Trustee Tomasi.
Sounds good. Last comment is, let's not forget that we're not living in a vacuum here. Mm-hmm. Our board gets employees from other boards, and they are used to a certain system, and they're not going to readily accept something that is very foreign to them, or they don't have that comfort level.
Okay.
That's just a reality, whether people want to hear it or not. And there's a lot of people in, private sector, and there is a base and there is an incentive. So, it's, and not too many places don't get at least a raise of some sort.
Thank you for that. Okay. Any further, anything further questions or comments? No, seeing none. You have information items that are the administrative procedures that corresponded to the very quick policies you passed earlier. No miscellaneous, no correspondence, no in camera, no business. There's no members absent. So could I please have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Carabella.
Well, I had some, I was waiting for the administrative procedure for this fundraising activity.
Oh, sorry. Please,
because
go ahead.
there are some changes I see this probably doesn't go out for stakeholder input, but again, the language doesn't reflect the intent and spirit of the motion's resolution 6118.
So you're on 5.1.
I am on page 42. What am I at?
Yeah, the procedure, she's looking at the administrative procedure of school fundraising activities.
Yes.
Yes.
So page 3 of 6. Funds raised. Oh, sorry. Just acceptable use of funds.
Trustee Carabella, Superintendent Overholt just has a comment he wants to make based on what we've already.
Through you, Mr. Chair, based on the changes that have been made to policy, obviously the procedure needs to match those changes. So we will be looking at those changes and reflect that in the procedure. We do believe that to be transparent to our stakeholders, it is important that they do see the procedure as well, that when we do send the policy out, the procedure should be part of that so that they are well aware of all those aspects of it. So knowing of all the things that have changed, we will make those changes. We'll let you see those changes as soon as we make them as well.
Just to follow up then, when it goes out for the stakeholder input, do we see the questions, or how, is it sent as our usual way with just the policy plus the previous motion for some wording?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it's a regular stakeholder feedback with the form that they're able to input that. Just a regular standard template that they will receive with the motion that was presented and what has to go along with that in the preamble. That will be part of that as well.
Okay.
Okay. So could I please have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Rowe, seconded by Trustee Michael. All in favor? Okay. Okay, opposed, great. Passes. So closing prayer, Trustee Carabella, and maybe we can keep in mind the tragedy in Saskatchewan.
Yes.
With the hockey team, yeah.
Yes, I will. And with that, I do want to close and thinking of the protection that Our Lady does give to all those families. And yesterday was the feast day of the Annunciation, so I thought I could lead us through the Angelus. The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary, and she conceived by the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Behold the handmaid of the Lord, be it done unto me according to thy word. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. And the Word was made flesh, dwelt among us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God, worthy of the promises of Christ. Let us pray. Pour forth, we beseech thee, O Lord, thy grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ thy Son was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.